Over the years, I've fielded a lot of questions about what's the best perennial to plant that has it all, like low maintenance, drought tolerant, great blooms, long color. That group is the Sedum genus. Hello and welcome, I'm Kevin. Today we're going to take a look at 8 of my favorite upright sedums. Let's go ahead and get started. Autumn Joy Sedum. This is one of the first sedums we'll look at. It's been around quite a while. Zones 3 to 10. So zone 3, that puts it in a pretty hardy category. It can tolerate up to 40 below zero. The sedums, for the most part, they're going to want full sun, at least 4 to 6 hours a day. And you could actually prune back a lot of these sedums early in the season, but you're going to then delay that flower bud development. But if you prune it back 6 to 8 inches, you'll just get bloom later in the season. And then you'll get probably smaller flowers also. But keep that in mind as we go through the slides. Matrona. This is a nice sedum that's got a little bit smaller flower. These pink flowers are smaller, but they're in clusters, so they look like they're about the same size as some of the other sedums we're going to look at, like the Autumn Joy. Again, this is a very hardy sedum to zone 3, and it loves full sun, as I mentioned. But these beautiful pink flowers, they're accent on this gray-green foliage. So that's just another real positive where you get a different color variation here. And this is also a sedum I found out that's got quite a few awards, and one of them the Garden Merit by the Royal Horticulture Society. Atlantis sedum. This is the smaller sedum that we're going to look at today, very compact in that 6 inches tall and wide. But look at that green middle there, and with the white margins and a yellow flower. Not quite as hardy as some of the other sedums we looked at. But it also gets a pink tone in the fall, so that's kind of unique. This sedum's actually planted in a really, really dry location, and that's again the characteristic of the sedums. They'll take that. We had to water it a little bit initially to kind of get it established so that root system could take care of itself. But in the long run, sedum, this is what they're great for, that rock covering, and this is actually under an overhang. Some of the sedum characteristics we've already mentioned, but one of them is that they're called Stonecrop, and they get that name because they're oftentimes planted in areas of rocky stone soil, and they'll tolerate that. I hadn't mentioned it, but one of the great things about the sedum is that they're going to bloom later in the season, late summer into the fall, almost up to winter. So that's the great thing about them. When you have perennials, for the most part in our yard, that are blooming in that early part of the season, like the May, the June, the July, they're all finishing up. Well, here come the sedum with so many different flower colors, so many different sizes, stem colors, leaf colors. That's what really makes them just a fantastic perennial to plant around your yard. As I mentioned too, full sun is very important. Sedums are not going to tolerate wet feet or that standing water saturated condition. This is a photo just showing early stages before they actually complete their flower buds. But again, look at that. Even without the flowers, you've got that beautiful lime green foliage on the left. That's one of the Autumn Joys. And then Dark Magic, we're going to look at that next with that plum dark color. And then below to another one we're going to look at is Martini. And look at that red stem. That's going to be something that'll stand out on that sedum. Dark Magic then. Zones 4 to 9, so quite hardy yet. Into that 30 below on average it'll tolerate. This is going to be a sedum that gets a little bit wider than tall. Now when I put down rock as a covering, or it could even be considered a mulch, that rock has no poly, no fabric underneath it. So it's going to emerge through those rocks. And this is definitely pushing wider than tall. And I'm hoping actually it's going to get about 3 feet wide, but just a beautiful little perennial with that deep, deep black leaf, deep pink flowers. This is one of my favorites. Here's that double Martini sedum we briefly mentioned, and this has got the smallest flower of all the sedums we're going to look at today, but look at the clusters of them, so it stands out as just thick flowers. 18 inches tall and wide on this one with that olive green foliage and the burgundy stems, which is very unique for this sedum. And the rose pink flowers there. The backdrop there, which I think makes a nice accent, is a baby blue eyes Colorado spruce. Some of the other sedum characteristics, we may have mentioned some of them already, but one of the big ones is that they attract honeybees in the fall. Honeybees are calm. They don't tend to be aggressive like a wasp. So if you don't like bees, you might be okay with something like this. It's not going to cause a lot of problems. Otherwise, make sure you plant the sedums a little bit further away from the doorways, etc. They're not going to tolerate the saturated areas like we mentioned, but there's so many different sizes and shapes to color is what makes this such a great group of perennials. Autumn Fire Sedum, quite similar to the Autumn Joy that we looked at first. Again, a very hardy selection. One of my favorite things about this sedum, it's got a range of the flowers where it starts out this deep pink and you end up eventually having it kind of have that white floret on the tips there. So a beautiful range of colors. I've got a photo here that shows that. Look at that deep pink early on the left there. And then it kind of ranges into that where you get that white sparkle. This is supposed to be a little bit more compact selection, tighter flowers, tighter canopy in general. Here we've got Neon Sedum. Look at that. That's a great name for that plant. Look at how it just stands out like a neon light. I think this is probably my favorite of the ones we're going to look at today, just because of that brightness, that lime green foliage with those bright pink flowers. Again, a very, very hardy sedum here. Again, that 18 to 24 inches tall and wide. This is a sport of brilliant. We're not going to look at brilliant today, but a nice sedum also. And it's got a gold fall color. Now this is something, as I was going through just some of my notes, I didn't really pay attention to that. So perhaps it's freezing off early, but I'll definitely take a look at that next year to see if we're getting that gold fall color. And here we're getting into fall. We've probably already experienced a hard frost here, but look at those brown stems. That can actually be quite showy going into fall, and it peeks out of the snow in the winter. But another reason I like to leave the tops on in the fall is you're going to provide a little bit of food for the birds. So winter interest is another one. We'll take a look at a video here of actually cutting back some of those sedum. They're brittle, they cut quite easily. I actually take a handful and I kind of twist and turn and they clip right off. And I usually leave just a little bit of the stubs there. But as we get into that winter interest, you can see there right in the middle, there's a clump that's underneath there. So we're not going to get that winter interest that I had hoped for this year. Maybe when it starts melting off, they won't have crushed down completely, so it won't be too bad. You know, sedum are also great for fall planters if you like to do that in the fall. Intermix them with some of the other things that are showy in the fall. Great for that. On the right there, that photo, the succulent garden, sedums mix in beautifully with something like that. And you can also use the sedum with cut flower arrangements throughout the season. Now, we didn't cover any of the ground cover sedums, but there's actually quite a few varieties available there too. We're going to try and do a video in the spring that covers a lot of the different sprawling ground covers. This one pictured here is a gold moss, and it's next to this icy blue juniper. Just that let them mix together. I think it creates kind of a really nice, complementary type thing for two creeping plants. But the ground cover sedum, they've got yellows, reds, pinks, variegated. So make sure you hit subscribe, maybe that notification button if you want to catch that video in the future. So there you go. That's what we've got for sedums to look at today in the upright category. I appreciate you watching this garden hike. We'll look forward to seeing you again next video.